Okay. All right, tonight we welcome back Sarah Loman. Sarah Loman is the author of 8 Flavors, The Untold Story of American Cuisine. It was released in 2016 with Simon & Schuster, and it was a #1 bestseller on Amazon. And The Atlantic called the book richly researched, intriguing, and cleverly written. Her current book project, Endangered Eating, Exploring America's Vanishing Cuisine, will be released by W.W. Norton & Co. in January 23rd. She's currently based in Las Vegas, Nevada, and you can learn more about her on her website, sarahloman.com. We do have that book, 8 Flavors, available from the library for anybody who's interested in reading that. It sounds fascinating. A lot of the stories that she talks to us about are from that book too, including tonight's. Sriracha is a cultural mashup that typifies American cuisine. Based on a Thai sauce, it was created by a Vietnamese immigrant of Chinese descent and is made outside of LA with California-grown ingredients. All your burning hot sauce questions will be answered as we explore how Sriracha has become more American than apple pie. I know many people who love Sriracha. Also, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Library for their support of this program. They are always doing so much to support all of the programs and services at the Chelmsford Library, but for this one in particular, they were so excited that they put together a little Sriracha tasting kits for everyone in the audience. There's 3 types of Sriracha in there, and they're complemented by a really tasty sounding honey Sriracha chicken recipe for you to try at home. You can come to the library starting tomorrow to pick up a kit and sign up. And while you're there, sign up to support the Friends if you don't already. And so with that, I will turn it over to Sarah to present the story of Sriracha. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Hi, everybody. How fun, a Sriracha tasting packet. I mean, I think that's really cool, but tonight we're only going to talk about the one, the only, the original Sriracha red bottle or clear bottle, technically, with the red sauce and the green cap. You can't miss it. And yes, this is a photograph from the space station. It is sent up there to make the rather bland foods that go up in the space station taste a little bit better. It's also a little harder to taste things in space. They need a little extra kick. And because Sriracha is a nice, hot, like thick hot sauce that sticks to stuff, that means that unlike Tabasco, it doesn't go floating all over the place. So in the chat, give me a yes or a no. Do you have a bottle of Sriracha in your refrigerator or cabinet right now? Let me know. And I was going to ask you where you thought Sriracha was from, but we could tell there's lots and lots of places from. Yes. Okay. Always lots of Sriracha lovers here. You actually technically don't have to keep it in the refrigerator, although many people do. It is shelf stable and it does not have to be refrigerated. All right, so let's go back. Let's unpack the story of this as we're celebrating Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders Month. We're going to celebrate the story of an entrepreneurial immigrant family that created this one-of-a-kind American hot sauce, although it has ancestors in other places. Well, someone said, of course. This story is from my book, 8 Flavors, The Untold Story of American Cuisine. As already mentioned, it is your library and available anywhere books are sold as well. I tell the story of 8 different ingredients in American cooking that I think sort of typify or maybe help us define American food and certainly help unite us as Americans. And many of the stories in this book are all about different immigrants who have brought all the foods and flavors to our communal dinner table. So the book is in chronological. Oh, good. Thanks, Jess. She says the kit includes a sample of the original HUEY FONG food Sriracha as well. So it'll be really fun to do a tasting because I'm sure they're all a little bit different. And that is the one that begat all the American copycats too. Everyone wanted their own market share. So my book is chronological and Sriracha is the most recent story of the most recent food to become, I think, American and sort of universally American. We start at black pepper right after the American Revolution and go all the way through the story of Sriracha in the late 20th and early 21st century. That's my information. I'm Sarah Loman. You can find me on social media at 4 Pounds Flour. And Jess, I'm sure is going to pop my website in the chat as well. You can sign up for my email list with all my other events and see what else is going on and see when the new book comes out and things like that. First things first, let's talk about the name. Sriracha is fine. Sriracha is fine too. It's America, baby. We say a lot of things, a lot of different ways. And again, this is an American-made hot sauce, so whatever you want to call it is just fine. We, of course, have the iconic bottle there. Oh, yes, Jess, thank you for reminding me. If you do have questions over the course of the presentation, I've got my chat open, as you can tell, since I'm interacting with Jess. Feel free to pop them in there. I don't mind this being a conversation. We're not a gigantic group tonight. We're a nice, healthy group of 33. So please, questions, comments, put them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. And I'll also, take questions at the end too, but whatever you feel inspired. So we've got the iconic bottle. These are actually made in-house in the Sriracha factory. We'll talk about that more later and see it. But it is a clear bottle with a bright red hot sauce inside. Got that green top, just like the top of a chili pepper. And the bottle is all full of symbolism. There's multiple languages there. The rooster is actually the astrological symbol of the creator, David TRAN. It is made by FONG Foods, and that name will become important later. Also, if you turn it around, it historically has the phone number of the rooster. Pick why. I just answered it. Such a good question. It is the Chinese astrological symbol of the creator, David TRAN. The many languages make it seem kind of exotic, and he sort of wanted that a little bit. And the phone number for their factory is on the bottle too, which is key in Sriracha first becoming popular. So we'll come back to all of that. So here I am with David TRAN, just to prove that I have a little bit of clout. Back in 2014, I think, I went and visited and toured the Sriracha factory, which is right outside of it's outside of Los Angeles, in a corporate industrial town called Irwindale. And since I went, it is now open to the public. So the tours do book out pretty far in advance, but anyone can go who wants to. Is it too late to say yes? I don't know if it's free or not. I can't remember. Check their website, but they definitely now let people in to take tours of the factory. So if you get inspired and you are headed to LA, you can make sure to go out there and visit. So I was lucky enough to both meet and interview this guy here a couple years ago, and a few pandemic pounds lighter, but that's fine by me. And it got a lot of the stories straight from the rooster's mouth, as it were. So going back even further, so the original Sriracha sauce, which is quite different from the sauce that's produced in America, was made in Sriracha, Thailand. And the original, that's where it is on the map. It's a seaside town. And the original is called Sriracha Panish. And it was created by a woman named Ms. Tanom Chakapak. Every time I see her name written or hear her spoken about in an interview, she's always referred to by her full name, Ms. Tanom Chakapak. This was created in the first half of the 20th century. It is a fermented hot sauce, a little bit more like Tabasco. Tabasco, after the peppers are ground, it sits in oak barrels and ages for a while. And similarly, that is done with Sriracha Panish. So it is aged. It's made with a type of pepper called prick chifa, which is not too hot, and it's also blended with vinegar and sugar. So it is a sauce that is a little bit more warm than it is like spicy burn. Spicy tasting, not spicy hot, okay? So this sauce was used in Sriracha, Thailand in a couple different dishes. One is a Thai omelet, which is a wok fried omelet, really tasty recipes in my book, but you basically mix the eggs with a little bit of rice flour, and that makes you a nice puffy omelet that you sort of pan fry in a deep wok. And traditionally you serve Sriracha Panish on the side. Also, because this is a seaside town, Sriracha Panish was used a lot with seafood, in particular crab. However, Sriracha Panish also was exported all around Southeast Asia. And one of the places that it particularly caught on was Vietnam. So in Vietnam, it's used pretty extensively in pho, if you're American, or pho, if you're Vietnamese. In both North and South Vietnam at the time, it was used as a traditional condiment. So the deal with pho is you have usually a beef-based broth that has all kinds of spices in it too, things like anise and cinnamon and peppercorns. There'll be noodles in there. There'll be pieces of beef, sometimes things like tripe too, brisket, depending how you like it. And then you're given sort of a plate of toppings. You'll have Thai basil, like you can see in this image here. You'll have bean sprouts. And then usually you're also given some hot sauce. And in America, it is almost always our Sriracha, but in Vietnam, it was Sriracha Panish. So The origins of pho are somewhat disputed. It can be said that Vietnam for much of the 19th and the early 20th century was a French colony. And before French colonial rule, people in Thailand, they didn't eat a lot of beef because oxen were used as work animals. And so it would be a huge loss of investment to eat them. But the French were used to eating beef back home. And so beef became a larger part of the diet and raising beef became more common. That was sort of combined with local rice noodle soup techniques. And some people say there's a little bit of a relation to pot au feu, which is sort of a long braised, spiced beef broth soupy thing. But I think really the main takeaway is just that like the French like to make beef stews and beef soups. And at that time, the people of Vietnam did not. And so the two cooking styles came together. And one of the results was pho. In South Vietnam, the style of pho was fancier than in the North. The North was very simple. And it's in the South that you start getting all the different accoutrements, the different cuts of beef. You can see there's like beef sausages in here, the bean sprouts I mentioned, there's cilantro, the Thai basil, and then the hot sauce. It was more of like a choose your own adventure dish as opposed to a very, very simple dish in the North. So this brings us to the story of David Tran, the creator of Sriracha. Here he is as a young man. So David Tran and his family, he was born in Vietnam, but his family is ethnically Chinese. These people are known as HUEY or Sino-Chinese. And so considers himself Vietnamese, ethnically Chinese. Growing up in Vietnam, he started a business with his brother and his father-in-law where they made hot pepper sauce. They were inspired by Sriracha paniche, and so they made a sauce from cooked peppers that came off his brother's pepper farm, and they bottled it in bottles that they recycled from the nearby US military station. His brother was growing hot peppers basically until the Vietnam War broke out. And then he was in a region that was pretty heavily disputed. So it was really hard to move fresh produce around. But they used a classic agricultural trick of converting something to make it more shelf stable and more valuable. We take corn, we make it into whiskey. We take grapes and make it into wine or jam. And in this case, they took peppers, cooked them, added things like vinegar and sugar, bottled their own hot sauce, and they were in business. They were basically selling it out of bikes and shopping carts, and they sold a lot to US servicemen in the area. Why were US servicemen eating a lot of hot sauce? The same reason that we shipped Sriracha hot sauce up to space. MREs, or meals ready to eat, are really, really bland. And in order to improve the quality of their food, they would add hot sauce. Famously, Tabasco launched a hot sauce campaign during this era, talking about how they were helping the servicemen by adding little bottles of Tabasco to their MREs. I should say too, Tabasco has been made on a little island off the coast of Louisiana since the 1860s with the Tabasco pepper by the McElhenney family. And you know, it always is ironic to me because it's said that Americans don't like spicy food. But what the heck have we been doing with all this Sriracha for the last 160 those Tabasco for 160 years. So we had plenty of hot sauces within broad American culture, even before Sriracha came on the scene. But one of the things that happens during war, during military invasions, is that Americans who might not have normally seen the world outside of America get posted in different countries, and they experience different local cultures and different foodways. And that's exactly what was happening when David Tran was selling local hot sauce to US servicemen. So I should say too that hot sauce is addictive. Some of you might have noticed that. Spicy food is chemically addictive. It's a safe scare. It's a little bit like riding a roller coaster. We love a roller coaster because when our body is alarmed, when it thinks we're in trouble, it releases endorphins. But endorphins are addictive, especially when at the end it's like, oh, I was safe. Nothing actually went wrong. So this isn't a roller coaster, but the capsaicin in hot peppers is the chemical that trips a receptor in our mouth called TRPV1. The TRPV1 is our hot receptor. It triggers when we take a sip of hot coffee or hot tea, and it also triggers in the presence of capsaicin. So the same reaction is happening whether we're eating a food that's burning our mouth, literally, or eating a food that's burning our mouth metaphorically, because it's the same sensation. And when we're in trouble, when we're in pain, those endorphins get released, but then we just keep enjoying our meal and it's fine. So we want more of it. And over time, we want spicier and spicier foods. So this is what happened to American servicemen who certainly came from all parts of the country, all different backgrounds, and some of them had more experience with heat than others. Keep in mind, chili peppers are indigenous to the Americas. But sort of our country as a whole became more interested in spicy foods after being exposed to the spicy foods of Vietnam. So the fall of Saigon happens in 1975. This is the American withdrawal. Vietnam is united under one basically socialist communist government. And they start targeting different ethnic groups within this new, I mean, there was a lot of things wrong. It's not socialism itself, but there's a lot of things wrong. Started targeting different ethnic groups, including the Sino-Chinese. The Sino-Chinese were some of the big business owners. And because it's a socialist government, they wanted a redistribution of wealth and this classic socialist idea. And so a lot of people are removed from their workplaces and their businesses, and they're sent to forced labor farm camps. By 1978, the government is pushing the Hoa or Sino-Chinese out of Vietnam and also charging them about $11,000 for the pleasure of leaving. So basically you had to have enough money to be able to bribe your way out. The United States, because of the part they played in the war, but you didn't think this was going all the way back to the Vietnam War, puts in special legislation to open our doors to Vietnamese refugees. And more than 70% of the refugees that flee Vietnam are Sino-Chinese or Hoa people. So that includes David Tran and his family. A lot of these refugees become known as the boat people in the late 70s and early 80s, and they are seeking any way to escape Vietnam, from little fishing skiffs to hugely overloaded shipping vessels. The ship that David Tran and his family managed to escape on is the HUEY FONG, which later is what he will name his company in honor of his escape from Vietnam. Now, the thing is that people are leaving, but there have been no declared sort of international ports of refuge. So basically, David and his three brothers, they split up their families and they each go on a different ship to a different destination. And the hope is that they will all make it out, because we know that there is somewhere in the neighborhood of 250,000 to 300,000 people that left Vietnam, but we also don't know how many people were dead at sea. In these little rickety fishing boats and trying to escape any way they can. We don't know what happened to every single one. David Tran boards the HUEY FONG. It's a shipping vessel. There are about 3,000 people on board. It should only have about 1,500, so it's incredibly overloaded. They decided to sail for Hong Kong. However, Hong Kong tells them to turn around. They won't receive them. So the HUEY FONG sails back out to international waters and drops anchor and waits. 28 days later, Hong Kong is declared an international port of refuge, and working with the UN, refugee camps are established, as well as a program to train and release refugees to different countries. So about a month after they sailed, they finally come into the port of Hong Kong and are able to get off this massively overcrowded boat. So Sriracha is made from red jalapeno peppers. What happens to David Tran and his family is they spend a little over a year in a refugee camp, and then eventually they are sent to Boston. So they leave Vietnam and then Hong Kong and end up in Boston in January of 1980. Just take for a moment, as a person who's, think about people who've been forced from their home countries and their home culture, and think specifically about coming from Vietnam to Boston in the middle of winter. All David told me he was thinking is, I need a job, I need to support my family. His brother's family had gotten placed in Los Angeles. So David calls his brother and said, do they have hot peppers out there? His brother said, yes. Within a month, David had packed his family up. They relocated to Los Angeles, and David Tran started making hot pepper sauce, just like how he knew how to do back home. But there's a couple of big changes. He had to work out the recipe. So unlike back in Vietnam, he decides not to cook the peppers. Just means it's a faster sauce. He doesn't have to do as much work. Less work is more money. Additionally, he starts experimenting with different American peppers, and he likes the jalapenos, but I'm sure you've been hard pressed to find a red jalapeno in your local grocery store. Here's why. So just like most peppers, jalapenos ripen from green to kind of a brownish color to then a deep red. But we only see the green ones because harvesting green jalapenos means you can pick them earlier in their ripening season, which means you save money and resources like water and fertilizer. And it also means that they can sit on the grocery store shelf longer before they go bad. They're actually a little bit spicier, the green ones. The capsaicin drops off as it ripens, and there are also more sugars involved in red peppers. So David tried to make this green hot sauce, and he said it just wasn't right. Hot sauce must be red. So he went to one of the largest markets in LA, and he noticed that the produce vendors would actually sort out the red jalapeno peppers because Americans weren't used to seeing them and throw them away. So he struck a deal with the vendors to buy up all the red peppers, and that's how he made his sauce. He started making sriracha in February 1980. He started selling it out of the back of his station wagon to various Vietnamese markets around the city. His whole idea was there are a lot of Vietnamese people coming to America. They're going to miss their foods from home, so I'm going to make one of those foods and provide it for him. And from that very first month, 22 years ago, he has never been able to produce enough sriracha sauce to keep up with demand. His company has never spent a penny on advertising, and yet every single year they have to make at least twice as much sriracha to meet demand. And every single year, all the sriracha made is bought out by distributors before it's even manufactured. So it's a pretty incredible business that seemed to hit just the perfect, I would say sweet spot, but maybe I mean hot spot with all Americans. So let me tell you a little bit more about the process of making sriracha. And then we're going to talk about how sriracha crossed over from being an ingredient in Vietnamese communities to being something that people from all different backgrounds really enjoy. I'm going to take a sip of my beverage. So this is FONG Foods out in Irwindale outside of LA. When I went in 2015 or 2014, this was brand new. They'd just been open a few months. They'd moved from a much smaller warehouse into this. I mean, it's not what I expected. I kind of expected low slung industrial buildings, and it was this really, really sleek office place. But most of the space in here is all storage because they harvest their peppers between Labor Day and Thanksgiving, grind them all at once, put them in barrels, and then they basically save them and then process their products the rest of the year. I'll show you what I mean. So this might have changed a little bit. They might be working with a few other vendors now, but when I visited, they were buying all their peppers from one family farm called Underwood Ranch. And Underwood Ranch is run by this fellow right here. It was, he has since retired, actually, as has David TRAN. Both the businesses were passed on to their kids. But Craig Underwood was is a fifth generation family farmer. And he said that his partnership with the TRAN family started in 1978 when Craig was trying to drum up some more business for his farm and wrote David a letter and said, hey, can we grow some peppers for you? And the first year he grew about 50 acres. And in 2014, he grew about 200 acres. And actually the sriracha business has entirely transformed the agriculture of the area just north of LA, which used to be all citrus groves. And now they're buying up citrus land to plant jalapeno peppers. With the success of sriracha, the jalapenos are more profitable than lemons and oranges. So the peppers, like I said, are harvested by immigrant workers in the area, and they're harvested between Labor Day and basically the end of November. They're first washed and sorted and put into these enormous trucks with these green trailers on them, 2 green trailers. They're bringing about 40 tons of peppers at the same time. The topsoil that's washed off of them is actually trucked back to the farms because it's too valuable to lose that topsoil. And as the peppers are harvested throughout the season, the colors will change. If you look in this batch, you can see that there's some red ones, there's some chocolate colored ones, there's a little bit of yellow, and there's even a couple underripe green ones on there too. So earlier in the season, the sauce tends to be a little bit of a brighter orange, and it's a little bit spicier. And towards the end of the season, it's a darker red color and is a little bit sweeter. So even though they are producing hundreds of thousands of tons of Sriracha sauce a year. They don't blend it all together to get like one product that's all the same. They keep the sort of seasonal barrels all together. So each bottle of Sriracha is actually, it's like a small batch product. It is unique, it's handmade. As Donna Lamb, the operations director, told me, she said, it's California. You know, we want to do this fresh. We want it to taste like the farm. So every bottle of Sriracha is a little bit different. And somebody told me at a class once that his dad actually collects Sriracha bottles like vintages of wine, that one's a little spicier, one's a little sweeter, and he'll use them in different ways. I don't go that far, but now you know that if there's a difference in the colors, there's nothing wrong with the bottle. It's just from peppers picked at different parts of the season. So the farm is north of LA, Irwindale is kind of east of LA, but it's only about 4 hours from farm to factory, and the peppers are ground the same day. They're dumped off these giant trucks into hoppers, which sort them and move them inside, where after they're washed, they're almost immediately ground. Now, just the ground pepper mash, they sell as sambal olik, which is just a thick pepper mash. It's a pepper paste. If they add they add garlic to it, and that's their chili garlic is what it's called. And then the Sriracha is ground even finer, and vinegar, a little bit of sugar is added, and a little bit of xanthan gum. Xanthan gum is a little bit of a thickener, and that's what gives Sriracha its unique sort of squeezable, but it stays there sort of texture. But the first step is grinding and storage. So all the chili mash goes into these blue food safe barrels, and then sort of Raiders of the Lost Ark style, they are stored in this enormous warehouse. Storage is more than 90% of the entire facility's square footage, because they have to store all the pepper to make Sriracha sauce, for the rest of the year. When I visited in 2014, they told me that by 2022, they already will have scaled out of this space and need to expand. So I haven't checked in. There was some talk of them opening up a second location in Texas. To them, the most important thing is being close to a growing area. So I don't know what has happened yet, but certainly Sriracha has continued to be popular, so they must be finding solutions. So as I mentioned already too, the bottles are fabricated on site. I mentioned too that David Tran is the one who designed the bottle. He also designed and maintained a lot of the machinery within the factory too, to sort of optimize efficiency to make just these 3 products. And when he describes the bottle design very simply, he just kind of says, oh, great question. Okay, wait, I have a question. I'll finish the sentence and I see the question there. That he just made it look like the chili pepper, but you know, you can spot a Sriracha bottle from like a mile away, right? It's so memorable. So stored at room temperature or refrigerated and fermented are the questions. So is it too late to say yes? Yes to all of you with your Sriracha in your kitchens. Great question. So I mentioned that both Tabasco and the original Sriracha paniche are both fermented chili sauces. Sriracha is not fermented. So when it goes into the barrels, because it's getting sugar, salt, and vinegar added, those are all preservatives. So that's going to stop any kind of fermentation in there. I get the xanthan gum, as I mentioned, and then it gets one, I believe it's potassium sorbitol is another like mold preventative. And then there's another one which helps it keep its bright red color. So it's totally iconic, this bottle. So it's stored at room temperature, and that's also why when you have a bottle of Sriracha, you don't even have to put it in the refrigerator. It is shelf stable. I will say that these chili peppers are so high in capsaicin and acidic that they would still be shelf stable without the addition of like the potassium sorbitol, and probably without the salt, but it is required by law to add those things to make sure that they're shelf stable. But capsaicin kills about 99.9% of microbes that it comes in contact with. So in a sense, you could probably clean your kitchen counters with Sriracha, but like, I don't recommend it, but in a pinch, it is capsaicin is a very, very, very strong antimicrobial, as is garlic. I forgot to mention that there's also a little bit of garlic in their garlic chili mash too. So yes, let's talk about the iconic bottle. There they are. There's the 3 products: the sambal olik, the chili paste, the chili garlic sauce, and then the iconic Sriracha hot sauce right there. So David designed the bottle and the packaging But then about a decade ago, the bottle making plant was going out of business. So he just bought the bottler from the factory. And so everything now is fabricated on site. It's really cool to see the bottles pressed into the mold, to then have the label wrapped around them, to see the lids being fabricated and then filled with Sriracha on its way down the conveyor belts to your mouth. This site was so new that I think only 3 of the bottlers were working. And, you know, I do not remember the numbers off the top of my head of how many they could bottle a day. Hundreds of thousands. Okay, let's trace a little trajectory is how Sriracha got from a little east of LA and in Vietnamese communities and to us and into our hearts. So this is a pretty incredible photo of a friend of mine. This is my friend Doan in the middle. Doan is a little older than me. Doan is no longer a child. You're probably familiar with Throwback Thursday, hashtag TBT on Facebook or Instagram. This photo popped up on Facebook as part of a Throwback Thursday that he posted. It's him and a bunch of his cousins in 1985 in Kansas City. Now, Doan is Vietnamese. His family were refugees. He was the first of his brothers to be born in America. He is probably a little cutie patootie of like 4 or 5 in this image, and they're enjoying some hot chicken. But of course, right there in the middle is a bottle, like unmistakable, obviously the exact Sriracha hot sauce that we are talking about today. So of course I saw this photo on Facebook and freaked out because I was doing the research tracking this history. And he said, yeah, he's ate this hot sauce his whole life growing up. He says, other than eating it with fried chicken, which quote unquote is beloved by the Vietnamese people, it was used almost exclusively when his family ate pho at home. So Sriracha was first produced in LA in 1980. Just under 5 years later, it's appearing in Vietnamese communities in Kansas City. So it's already spread and is distributed across the country by 85. The way that most Americans outside of Vietnamese American communities came across it is through pho restaurants. This is actually where I remember first spotting it. In the mid 2000s, I was living in New York and I'd often go down to DC to visit friends of mine. And at the end of the weekend on Sunday mornings before I got back on my Bolt bus, we almost always went to Pho 75, which was actually in Arlington, Virginia, just outside of Washington, DC. And this is when I first spotted Sriracha on the table, and it is such a memorable bottle. So by the late 80s and early 90s, as more Americans who are not from Vietnamese backgrounds are exploring Vietnamese cuisine, and in particular pho restaurants, they were noticing this bright red bottle of really delicious hot sauce. Now, a note, jalapeno peppers are about half as hot as a Tabasco pepper. So Sriracha itself is about half as hot as the McElhenney family's signature hot sauce. So that in a way is why it's become such a universally beloved hot sauce in America, because especially for someone who's just getting into the spicy game, it's not quite as burny, deadly, like setting your mouth on fire. And because it's a little more viscous, it's thicker, you can really control how much you're putting in on every single bite. So people were really intrigued by this hot sauce. They started stealing the bottles from pho restaurants. Don't steal, everybody. But remember I mentioned that David Tran put the phone number of his factory on the back and later his website. So that meant when people didn't know where to get this sauce, they could call the factory and buy a box of bottles of Sriracha straight from David Tran in his factory. I actually remember buying this probably like 2008. I asked a friend of mine what they wanted for Christmas, and they asked me to go to Chinatown and get that bottle of red hot sauce with the rooster on it. So pretty early on, but like around late 80s, early 90s is when it starts crossing over into non-Vietnamese communities. And interestingly, one of the very first places I have found Sriracha clearly mentioned in English press is in a review of that same Pho 75 restaurant that I used to go to with my friends all the way back from 1987. It described the inside of the restaurant as plain as a post, so that hadn't changed very much in the 20 years since I was frequenting there. It also said the pho was delicious as served, but it came with different things you could put on it, including a bright red bottle of Sriracha hot sauce. So it's mentioned in print for the first time that I can find, and there's always new things online. It's worth checking into again. But this is one of the earliest references out there in a magazine, not in a Vietnamese community. And so this speaks to a little bit, how do things cross from immigrant communities into broader American culture? And there is a sort of food and restaurant research facility outside of California that's developed this like 5-phase system of something going from immigrant communities into the mainstream. And phase 1 of it, passing out of solely immigrant communities, is that it often appears in fine dining foodie establishments. And an ingredient will often make that crossover because the kitchen workers are using that ingredient in family meal, in their own food. So kitchen workers in San Francisco had been using Sriracha since the early 80s, and the chefs took notice and began incorporating it in their dishes. I found a restaurant review from 1997 from Manhattan for this Asian fusion place that offered what was described as the same iconic bottle, green top, bright red sauce. It was definitely Sriracha. So that's like 97 and I'm sure there's probably earlier ones too. Phase 2 is when foodie media picks up at it. So websites, magazines. In this case, in 2010, Bon Appetit declared Sriracha the ingredient of the year. So it's like, it was kind of slow at the first, and then things are going to get really, really, really fast. Because phase 3 is when it starts appearing in mainstream chain restaurants. And this happened at almost the same time. It was actually in 2009 that Applebee's announced its new Sriracha shrimp. Although P.F. Chang's has a Sriracha dipping sauce really about a decade earlier in the late 90s. This is sort of the first, it didn't name it as a Sriracha dipping sauce. It was an ingredient in it. So this was the first campaign that listed it, that labeled it as new Sriracha shrimp. And sure, s'mores. Hopefully not in the same meal. Gross. So then the next phase is the ingredient appearing in women's magazines and in media that's not specifically foodie focused. So it was in 2011 that Martha Stewart asked the question, have you heard about Sriracha? And there was a whole article in Martha Stewart Living, and then plenty of recipes on their website, much like the Sriracha glazed chicken that I think is coming out in your tasting packs. Are we on phase 5? I lost track. Phase 5 is when it starts appearing in like bulk mainstream chain stores, like this $2.64 bottle in Walmart. And this is when I'm trying to see if a new food or flavor has become American yet. I often check Walmart's website to see if they're selling it yet. A great example is when my book came out in 2016, one of the flavors that I sort of predicted was going to become really big is matcha. That's the finely ground bright green tea from Japan, really, really vegetal. Came to America via baked goods, really, but then matcha lattes and things like that. So in 2016, matcha wasn't being sold on Walmart's website, but just 2 years later in 2018, there were 6 different versions of it available on Walmart's website. So you can see how quickly things go over this last phase. And then, the other part of this last phase too is that it appears in fast food restaurants. So in 2015, I believe Subway introduced its Sriracha mayonnaise. And that means that Walmart and Subway means it's American, baby. If you can get it anywhere, that means it's now kind of outside of every culture. But at the same time, I just went out for a pho 2 weeks ago, and what of course was on my table, but no other hot sauce except the one, the only, the original Sriracha, FONG Sriracha hot chili sauce. And you know what? I'm all for it. Sriracha, all the things. Thank you, the oatmeal. And that's the story of Sriracha. So I know I just threw a lot of information at you, and I was really, really pumped about talking about Sriracha. Do you have any questions before we wrap up today? Do you have questions, Jess? I'll take your questions too.
Oh, hi, I'm here. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. That was really great.
Sure. I love this story, and I love this lovely family, and it is like such an iconic American entrepreneurial spirit, small business success kind of story, which honestly, not every immigrant should have to be this. Like, immigrants should also just be allowed to like sit at home, like people who were born in America do, and watch some TV at night. David Tran is a truly unique human being, clearly brilliant, made the sauce, designed the bottle, engineered the equipment, never advertised. Like, what a force. Can I?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm really so impressed by the whole operation. Like he just took it over, like you just said. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm
Now
really,
he's retired, or he tried
No.
to. When I met him, he was 68, and his daughter-in-law said that like he was already retired, but like wasn't really. He was still tooling around the factory at his own golf cart with a gold plate on the front that had his name on it, David Tran, founder. But as far as I know, now the whole factory's been passed on to the second generation of the family, which is really cool.
That is really cool. Did he ever
Yeah.
patent the recipe? I mean, I know there's a bunch of other.
It is adorable. Sorry, I'm talking to Kathy in the chat too. Yeah, that's a great question. So they did try to patent the name. The recipe, okay. The recipe was a proprietary secret. And up until basically I called and said, can I have a tour? At a certain point, they were worried about someone stealing the recipe, stealing the whatever. But even by 2014, when I showed up there, David said, she can see the whole factory. We were worried about competitors, but I have no competitors. Like there's only one Sriracha. So they're not really so worried about that anymore. And of course, for them, a lot of the recipe is the freshness and the localness of the produce. So, you know, and I think most of us would rather just buy a bottle off the shelf than try to make it ourselves. So they did try to trademark the name Sriracha because, you know, in your package, you've got like 3 or 4 different brands of Sriracha hot sauce. That actually went to court. And basically the copyright ruling was that because it's named after a town, the name cannot be copyrighted. So HUEY FONG is copyrighted, but not Sriracha, which is why you see all these different variations. And it's not that having different variations are bad. They all taste a little bit different. You know, some people love the original Sriracha paniche. Shark Sriracha sauce is another one. I can't remember, from Southeast Asia. I don't remember if it's Vietnamese or from Thailand, but that's another pretty popular one. Even Tabasco tried to get in it on a while and release their own Sriracha sauce, but I think they gave up on it and just stuck with what they know. Oh, it's interesting. Joanna said, must use sambal oelek every day, but I've noticed it doesn't stay as red as Sriracha. I don't remember when they add the one ingredient that keeps it bright off the top of my head. I don't know if it just goes into the Sriracha, but also it's just, you know, there's just different ingredients and it's a thinner blend. So I think that tends to bring out that bright color too. And yeah, even in the Sriracha, it might get a little deeper red over time, but again, it doesn't matter. It's perfectly fine for you. Thank you, Elaine. Elaine says I made the sauce come alive.
Is it
my pleasure.
Do people in Vietnam and Thailand, do they make their own homemade Sriracha, or do
No,
they'll
still use Sriracha paniche. There's actually a really cute Sriracha documentary out that's worth watching. My favorite part of it is they interview people in Vietnam and I think actually in Sriracha in Thailand, and ask them show them the bottle and say, have you heard of this? And they say no. And they say, wait, Americans eat this? And they say, wait, I thought Americans didn't like spicy food, which again is a stereotype that's not at all true. And also speaks to us thinking of one type, like America is just pilgrims in New England, which obviously isn't true. America is a huge country. Some of it was Mexico. Some of it is full of immigrants from India. Like there are many people that love hot and spicy foods, even this like Scotch Irish girl included. But it was really funny to see people in Thailand go, wait, Americans eat this? So that came out a couple years ago, I think probably 2015, but it's really cute, worth a watch. I think it's on YouTube.
All right, I'll try to find a link to it for people.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then I had another question, but I've just forgotten it.
That's okay.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Oh, something just popped up in the Q&A. Oh, yeah.
It was a thank you.
Excellent.
You're welcome.
This was a really excellent presentation as part of our one book series because it highlights how amazing, like, having immigrants come to the country and like enrich our culture and enrich the culture of everybody. And that's what the one book was really about. It was about this, you know, the Vietnamese immigrants coming, or the Boat people. You said we had a presentation on the Boat people not too long ago. And it was amazing, the varied stories that just make our culture so wonderful. So thank you so much.
When we open our doors to immigrants, it has only ever improved this country. It's brought us all sorts of wonderful people and wonderful things, hot sauce included. in the chat, they say I should come back for more programs. Luckily, I will be back June 23rd.
Yep, June 23rd. Yep, go ahead.
Yes. And Teresa, my book does talk about other food origin stories. So the ingredients that I cover and that I argue as being all American are black pepper, vanilla, chili powder, curry powder, soy sauce, garlic, monosodium glutamate, and sriracha. So it's those 8 stories. And then, like I said, in the final chapter, I sort of guess what might be coming next. And since this book came out now almost 6 years ago, it's fun to see which of those predictions came to fruition and which have not.
Awesome. I should recommend your our Bibliobites cookbook book. Foodie group should read that book, I think, and have you online.
Lots of recipes in there too.
Awesome. So on June 23rd, Sarah will be back to talk about ice cream, perfect for the summer. And hopefully we'll be able to secure a ice cream gift certificate giveaway. So definitely sign up for that so that you can have a chance at that. Pick up someone asked about the Sriracha kits. You can come and pick those up starting tomorrow. I'll have them at the circulation desk tomorrow, and then after that, I'll put them out on a table by the entrance. So you can just pick them up when you come in. All right. Thank you so much, Sarah, for another excellent presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. I'll see you in June.
See you next time.